everybody, and welcome to the Friday Night Drive quarterfinal preview podcast. I'm Josh Welge here with Steve Soucie and special guest Mason Schweizer. How you guys doing today?
Not too bad. Getting ready for a quarterfinal weekend.
That's no doubt about it. You know, that first round, there was obviously a few too many blowouts for my liking. Second round, I felt like it got a little real with some closer games. And now we head to the quarterfinal. I tell you what, guys, I'm looking at my window. The best part about it is I'm looking at sunny skies. It's getting warmer throughout the week. We could be hitting 60 by Saturday. Pretty good for quarterfinal Saturday.
Just kind of a wild pendulum that we've been going through after last weekend that was not too pretty on that front. And to look at those sneaking up at the weather forecast this weekend, I'm like, might be 70 on Saturday. I mean, I was like, wow. I mean, that usually doesn't do my internal system very well. I usually get sick in those situations, so it immediately freaked me out. But I'll be honest, I'd rather have 70 than 20, so I'll take it.
Mason Suits could be wearing shorts at 63rd and Dante on Saturday afternoon. Who knows?
Oh, I know. I've seen Suits in his shorts this time of year before.
Yeah, very good. Well, as we've done, we're going to start with the 1A, work our way back up to the 8A, and talk a little bit about that Lincoln East Mount Carmel game. But starting with 1A, and man, guys, that Western Illinois, I'm going to butcher Western Illinois Valley Conference. Making a name for itself, and really was one of the big games last week was Brown County taking down Camp Point Central. Now they get another conference rematch, and they're kind of shoes on the other foot.
Yeah, it definitely kind of looks like that in that situation. Now, you look at the WIVIC and the way that they've been able to do this. You know, before the playoffs started, it kind of felt like we were heading towards a collision course between the NUIC on the top, the WIVIC on the bottom. But if you would have asked people, hey, who's going to be there, those representatives, the NUIC still pretty much intact the way people thought. It was going to be Stockton, maybe Lena Winslow, one of those two teams. They're both still in it. The WIVIC, the first name you would have heard was Camp Point Central. So now you kind of got to look at it again. Is it Calhoun? The only non-WIVIC team in the bottom half of the bracket is Casey Westfield, which is kind of the wild card there. But then you've got Brown County and Carrollton at the bottom there. So it's definitely it definitely looks like we're getting exactly what we thought in 1A with those two conferences kind of zeroing in on potentially being represented on both sides of the bracket.
Yeah, I mean, I almost feel like I'd be disappointed if it wasn't a matchup of those two conferences in the championship game with respect to the other teams. I mean, those conferences have just been such the powerhouse leagues that it seems like it's meant to be, but we'll see what happens.
Well, and like you said, Casey Westfield, super wild card. They've won both of their first two games by 5 touchdowns apiece. And like you said, they're kind of the only team that sticks out in the bottom of that bracket in terms of not being in the WIVIC. So really going to be interesting to see how they can do against Calhoun this week, I think. That's one of my circled Class 1A game, I would say.
On the top end of the bracket, Suits or Mason, either of those games kind of particularly catch your eye between the Stockton and Lena Winslow matchups?
We talked a little bit about this before, about how Dwight seems to be peaking here at the right time, but, I got to think that this is a bigger challenge than they've seen in those opening 2 rounds. Granted, I was really surprised that Dwight beat Clifton Central last week, but when you got back the information about what happened in that game, Dwight very opportunistic, forced a series of second-half turnovers and kind of controlled that football game, scored in a variety of ways. That's the kind of team right now that if I'm Stockton, I'm looking at him saying, I don't know what I'm looking at here. I don't know it seems like this is a team that could maybe throw the kitchen sink at me, and if I don't come correct and maybe get caught sneaking a little peek ahead at that potential rematch with Lena Winslow, if they don't bring their best effort, at this point, I got to stop underestimating Dwight.
No doubt. I would turn attention to Class 2A, a bracket that started with 7 undefeated teams, and Soucie wrote this week that it's down to 3. But hey, one of the teams that's not undefeated, is the team that we want to talk about, Wilmington. My goodness, they sure look like a state champion right now. We'll see what happens, but they got a game this week, Mason, against a Tri-Valley team that they know them pretty well from recent playoff history.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to 2022, in the second round of the playoffs that year in Class 2A. Tri-Valley defeated Wilmington, and that's the last time anyone's beat Wilmington on its home turf. These two teams, every year Wilmington's been in Class 2A, they've met in the playoffs. And the two prior times the Wildcats won, they went on to win a state championship. Could be the case again this year. And I just think, the way the Wildcats have been dominating, whoever they have in the backfield scoring. It doesn't matter if it's Ryan Ketman. It doesn't matter if it's any of the other slew of guys they've got. They got three-year starters up front. I mean, they're the ultimate Jeff Reens team. Like, he's got his system and what works, and these kids just have done an admirable job of continuing where so many teams have left off before them.
I was going to say,
Mason mentions that 2022 game. I was at that game, and I remember walking off the field. I've probably seen somewhere in the neighborhood of 30 to 35 Wilmington playoff games at that field. That sounds like an incredible amount, but I think that's probably about what it is. And I just remember walking off that field going, this feels really weird because I am just not used to walking off of Wilmington field, especially in the playoffs, going, they just lost. It felt completely bizarre.
You guys have seen a lot of Wilmington football, unfortunately more than I have, because man, I need to see that team play. But what Mason? What about this team in particular that stands out? You talked about it a little bit.
I think it's what they've got up front and what they've got defensively. Defensively they can just match up with any style, really. They don't have the biggest guys or the fastest guys, but they just play sound football. They're really good at timing. Their coaching's great. They're great at timing their blitzes. Coach Reens always seems to dial things up at the right time. And they ground you down with that offensive style. And, what starts as 3 yards in a cloud of dust, by the time you get to the end of the second quarter, start of the second half, those plays start to break more and more, and it just really demoralizes the other team.
Another matchup in the 2A bracket, we talked about the undefeated teams. Farmington's had a couple close calls, though, in the playoffs. I mean, they had a game in the first round that came down to the very end. They're actually trailing, I believe, against Aurora Christian last week. And now they get El Paso Gridley, who just quietly went about their business, hammering a very good Newman Central Catholic team last week. What do you guys make about that one?
I look at El Paso Gridley as a team that, I kind of had been reevaluating them all season long. Early in the year, it was like, well, maybe Tri-Valley's down a little bit. Well, I think we're seeing now they weren't. It's one of those situations where El Paso Gridley is just a really good football team. So, as we've gone along, and that was another signal to me, especially from the defensive side of the football, the fact that they're able to shut out Sterling Newman, a quality program in the fashion that they did. I look at that game right now, and I really like El Paso's chances of winning that football game. Like you said, Farmington's kind of been playing with fire the first couple rounds of the playoffs, and Farmington kind of hangs its hat on being able to score a bunch of points, and they really have not been able to do that in the playoffs the way they have in the regular season. So maybe when they run into a defense like El Paso's, they're going to have a lot of problems.
I do think that Farmington defense, though, has really been impressive the first couple of weeks. I mean, to hold Aurora Christian to what they did, 14 points, right? I mean, that's pretty much unheard of. I've seen that Eagles offense funny myself over the years. It's going to be a very physical affair, I think, down in El Paso on Saturday with two teams that have really relied on their defense through the first 2 rounds.
No doubt. Turning our attention to 3A, top half of the bracket. Obviously a huge matchup was IHSA Catholic going to Byron. Byron is a team that, we know they've really been dominant in that 3A the last few years. But, IHSA Catholic is one program that hasn't minded playing them a little bit. They in 2021, I was at a game that IHSA Catholic led most of the way, and they ended up losing at the very end. And then 2022, they honestly hammered Byron, 35-0. It was not much of a game, but I don't know, Soucie. This is a tough assignment for IHSA Catholic going up to Byron. This is I think we're going to learn a lot about this young IHSA Catholic team going up to Byron.
This is one of the games when I look at it, and it seems to happen. It hasn't been this game in particular, but maybe it's a Byron Montini game in the past where I start banging my fist on the table for 1 to 32 seeding. Because I can't see that game, and I want to. So I feel like this game is coming up too soon, either in the semis, the quarters, whatever. And I feel like every year after one of these games gets played, whether it's Byron and IC Catholic, Byron and Montini, the comment that comes out of after that game was, well, guess we just saw the 3A state championship there. I mean, it feels like that's the conversation line that we have almost every single time when we get this game, whether it be in the quarters or the semifinals or whenever it ends up popping up, whenever Byron gets whoever the Catholic League representative is that falls into 3A, it feels like we have this conversation before we should be having this conversation. This is a conversation that we should be having 2 weeks from now, in my opinion.
I was going to say, I bet Byron would probably vote for that one for 32.
Yeah.
Given who they keep running into in the second round last year or the quarterfinals in this case. Mason, you just got to see IC Catholic last week. What was your impressions? And, what do you think about their matchup going up to Byron? A huge assignment, with Caden Constantine and all those guys.
I was really impressed. IC, especially in the second half, their front four were able to generate pressure and passing downs, which, of course, against Byron, you're not going to see a whole lot. But I think that seeing the physicality they had up front does bode well to try and shut down Byron's, kind of run-heavy approach. And just, some people were saying, oh, IC let a Bishop Mac team that hadn't played a lot of people hang around or kind of be in there. I thought it was more so anytime that the Irish threw a punch, the Knights were able to respond back, and that's kind of the sign of a winning team. I haven't been to Byron. It's been a couple of years since I've seen Byron. I believe it was Considine's freshman, maybe his sophomore year. But it sounds like not a whole lot's changed up there.
No doubt about that. This should be a great matchup, and similar to Soucie, I too wish I was going to be at that game. Or at least get to see that live. Get to see a few minutes of it at the very least. On the other end of the bracket, Soucie, you wrote about this week, Williamsville and Kelowna Unity. I think you wrote this is the fifth time they've played since 2012. I don't believe you. This feels like it's been at least 10 times they've faced each other.
It certainly does. And I think if you kind of go back and look at those brackets, I was surprised to find out it was only 5-2. Like I went and I looked in the history archives, and I'm like going, I've got old brackets in my filing cabinet. I almost pulled them out because I was like, wait a minute, this can't be right. This has to be wrong. So, because it feels like, I mean, they're in the quarterfinals or in that way. Both these programs are in the quarterfinals almost every year. It seemed like law of averages, especially since we went to North and South, that they would be paired off at some point in time. But surprisingly, they've only ran into each other 5 times. It feels like 8 or 9, to be completely honest with you.
Yeah, should be a good one there. Let's move ahead to 4A. At the top of the bracket, Montini and Coal City. It was interesting. I was talking to Montini coach Mike Bukowski on Saturday, and he told me, he's like, there's a little history there. 2004 Class 4A state championship, Montini beat Coal City. It was Montini's first state championship. And now they play each other again 21 years later. And I tell you what, Coal City, great year. Coming off of that, I mean, just knocked down, drag 'em out fight last week at Dixon. Well, guess what? Now you got to go on the road up to Montini. It seems like a tough assignment for Coal City with respect to the Coalers.
It does, but they've got some dudes, man. I mean, last year this Coalers team was the closest to Class 4A champions DePaul that anybody saw in the postseason, and they've got a lot of those same kids back. I mean, they've got an absolutely legendary wrestling program up there, and a lot of those kids make up the starting defense, especially on this team. And the Coalers are historically a pretty grinded out on the ground type of team, and Logan Natashuk certainly does that. But the emergence of junior quarterback Connor Henline, maybe not the top marquee quarterback name in this matchup, I think would be fair to say, but they've got a really balanced offense. And, I don't think anyone's going to say they're the favorites going against this Montini team that just seems overwhelming. But I do think that the Coalers can give them as good a game as anybody in this 4A field.
You referenced that Coal City wrestling program. Coach Bukowski, who also coaches wrestling, he actually mentioned that when I talked to him, that when he talked about Coal City, he's like, the respect that he has for that program, and not only their football program, but their athletic program with what they do wrestling wise. But, I think Coal City can score. It's just, I wonder, can they slow down that Montini offense? It's just so explosive. Right. That's the question I have for that game.
Yeah,
bottom.
I don't know
But
what the answer is there, in terms of whether or not that can happen, because it is a different animal. Like, I mean, as much as we talk about, what they've done so far, the one time that they've played a team that I think you can put on that kind of elite level, their defense didn't really answer the bell. So, can they rebound from what happened to them against somebody like Wilmington? I don't know. But I mean, Montini's a really, really big challenge, as big as anyone they've seen. And I'd even include Wilmington in that pocket.
yeah, on the bottom half of the bracket, Sacred Heart Griffin against Rochester. Of course, it used to be the Leonard Bowl. It no longer is. Ken Leonard, longtime Sacred Heart Griffin coach, retired after 2022. His son Derek still at Rochester. These two teams played, I believe, it was week 9 that
Yes.
they played.
Yeah,
and
they almost always play in week 9. So that's been something that has been gone back for years and years and years. So it's an interesting game, because it's just one of those times where it feels like the first game was really competitive and close. It's the kind of thing, well, I don't know if I want to play a team like that with the rivalry that they have, all the connections intertwined and all that other stuff. So quickly again in a high stakes situation like this. I think Rochester is the better team, but I don't think the margin is so wide that it's out of the realm of possibilities that Sacred Heart Griffin can flip the script here.
Very good. I think we're going to take a word here from our sponsors. When we come back, we'll look at 5A through 8A.
SGKR Injury Attorneys tackles the toughest cases. I'm Matt Rundio. When life throws a flag, we go on offense to protect your rights. Don't get sidelined. Score a touchdown with SGKR. Visit us at sgkr.law.
At Oliver's, we are proud to serve our community. We serve up great customer service, quality products, ease of shopping, and we serve up delicious barbecued sandwiches at our fundraiser cookouts. So stop by Oliver's, 748 North Brenton and Dixon, and help fund our local clubs and events.
In Illinois and into Iowa, the story of Shaw Media is a story of trust. Since 1851, we've been informing, connecting, and reflecting the communities we serve, large and small, rural and urban, suburban, and river towns alike, with dozens of local newspapers, radio stations, magazines, and specialty brands like Friday Night Drive and Starve Rock Country. We meet people wherever they are. We shine a light on local government. We celebrate Friday night touchdowns. We tell the stories that shape your day, from neighborhood heroes to the Chicago Bears. But what truly sets us apart? It's our people. The award-winning journalists, broadcasters, and storytellers who live here, work here, and care deeply about what matters most to you. We don't just report the news. We're part of the fabric of the places we serve, from the Mississippi to the Illinois, from the Fox all the way to the chain of lakes. Trusted for generations, still earning it every day. Shaw Media, your most trusted local source.
Back here on the Friday Night Drive quarterfinal preview podcast. Souce, we turn and look ahead to Class 5A, and congratulations and a round of applause to Belvedere North and Cary Grove for playing on Friday evening this week. The only, I believe, Souce, the only Friday night matchup across the 80 classes. So again, congrats to them, and given the weather, why not? I mean, it should be a decent night. Belvedere North comes in undefeated, but I tell you what, Souce, Cary Grove, after that first week or two, it was kind of like, all right, what's wrong with, maybe not what's wrong with Cary Grove, but maybe Cary Grove's maybe not what they have been. And they just seem to be getting better and better and on a roll. And they're to the point where now, I mean, I'm almost surprised if we're not going to be seeing them in ISU in a couple weeks.
I do not know why I was muted there. Interesting. Okay, back now. It's been a really impressive turnover there for Cary Grove. The way that they've kind of bounced back from that. It wasn't, I guess, shocking that they lost to Prairie Ridge, and Burlington Central's put together a really good year. But even though it was still kind of, well, Cary Grove's below 500. What's going on here? So you kind of move them a little bit maybe to the back of the radar. You can't ever kind of remove them entirely, especially since we knew that they'd be moving down from 6A to 5A this year. And of all the classes I've felt all season long, 5A was the one that was kind of going to be the most wide open in terms of teams with the ability to win the state championship. So But still, what they've done, especially now in the playoffs, they've really kind of manhandled the first two opponents on their playoff slate, and they've really kind of been on a roll here in the second half. So you talk about momentum and whether or not it's a real thing. I think it's definitely a real thing in the case of Cary Grove.
I tell you what, 5A is the bracket that stands out to me the most. That I don't really know what to make of this bracket. All over the place.
Yeah, and I mean, I looked at it earlier today, and I was thinking to myself, who's the favorite?
Yeah,
like if you had to pin a favorite right now, who do you think it is? And I sat there and thought about it for a minute, and you know what? Is it St. Francis? I mean, I don't know. It might be.
I really don't know. I mean, I thought that I think St. Francis is. I think even Coach McMillan would say he's probably had better teams in this one, but sometimes it's not only about your team; it's about who you have to face. So, and they've done a whale of a job getting through Morgan Park and then Prairie Ridge, and they're back in the quarterfinals now. So maybe they are. We'll see. It's definitely a wild bracket. And another matchup, Washington Providence. Soucie, I'll be the first one to admit I do not know a whole lot about Washington. They just keep on winning. And Providence, a little bit up and down, young, talented, but I mean, they just beat a really good Kankakee team. I don't know. What do you make of that one?
It's interesting. You just kind of look at what Washington has done. Their only loss was way back in the non-conference portion of the season. I think it was in week 2. They lost by 1 point to Niles Notre Dame, a team that didn't even make the playoffs. And when that happened, I was like, maybe Washington isn't what Washington usually is. But they proceeded to go through a Mid-Illini conference schedule that was absolute chaos, other than Washington. All Washington did was win, win, win. Just go right along the line, while all the other teams in that conference seemed to be losing by upset, winning a game that maybe they shouldn't have. All over the league, but the one thing that was a constant was Washington was winning football games. They just were, and I think that's a pretty good conference. Metamora pushed Morris really hard last week before bowing out. Dunlap is still in the playoffs right now in the 6A quarterfinals. It's a good league. So the fact that Washington was able to play consistently and win against all that competition and really not get pushed that hard in most of those games shows that Washington is pretty solid. And like you mentioned, Providence is capable of putting together a monster performance. And then there have been other times when I've wondered, I'm not sure. There's been some inconsistencies with that. They're immensely talented. They are a very good football team. It would not surprise me if they won this football game at all. It also wouldn't surprise me if they won convincingly. But it's just one of those things where I'm not sure on a week-to-week basis exactly what we're going to get out of Providence.
Turning attention to 6A, top of the bracket, Nazareth playing Lake Zurich. And Nazareth, man, they were in a dogfight last week. They're in one of those weather games that they had to overcome. And I thought they showed a lot of mettle being able to pull it out in the second half after I think they trailed at halftime to Wheaton Warrenville South on the road. Now they got Lake Zurich going to their place. Lake Zurich has been playing very good football, playing very good defense like they normally do. I just wonder if I don't know. This feels like a tricky spot for Lake Zurich going on the road in Naz.
Yeah, it does. And that Nazareth game was interesting because I was kind of I was keeping track of it on the internet, and then I came home and I was like, oh yeah, I didn't see what happened with Nazareth. I clicked it on and it was 28-7 all of a sudden. And I'm like, that is not indicative of the way that game really was. No. I was like, that game was much closer than that. So, and with this Lake Zurich team playing defense the way that they have been, if they can kind of get a foothold there and maybe frustrate Nazareth a little bit, I think that actually has the potential to be a pretty good game.
The question I have about that is Lake Zurich's played great defense this year, but I look at two of the games that they lost, or the two games they lost. Fremd, really good team. Warren, really good team. And I know what Naz can do offensively, so I just have pause if what Lake Zurich's defense does, is it more reminiscent of what they've done in those wins or in that loss? You know what I'm getting at here?
Yeah, I do. But the one thing that I would kind of counter that with, both of those games were a while ago.
They were.
I think it seems like they've took it up a notch defensively. And, the one that kind of really stood out to me, and I think Lake Zurich was a better team. I'm not surprised that they won. But last week, them shutting out an Antioch team, the fact that they won does not surprise me. Antioch scores a ton of points. The fact they couldn't get any on them is kind of indicative to me how good this defense is playing right now.
Yeah. Elsewhere in the 6A bracket, Burlington Central going on the road to Fenwick. Burlington Central in the quarterfinals for the first time since 2006. Now they get Fenwick. I know you've talked about it a lot with Matt Rotowa on your guys' podcast. Fenwick, a team that we kind of wondered about going into the year after graduating Nate Marshall. But, man, they have just been impressive all year long. I thought their defense was really good last year. It feels like they're a more well-rounded roster this year, that they can really put up the points too.
Yeah, it does really seem like that. I watched a good chunk of that Fenwick Rolling Meadows game kind of in pieces last week, and it seemed like every time I clicked away and then clicked back maybe 2 minutes later, Fenwick had scored another touchdown. It was, they have really, dropped the hammer down, especially in these playoff games. They kind of a little bit under the radar, but the one thing that you kind of have to look at is, so many of the teams that they played during the regular season are still around right now. That schedule has prepared them greatly for this situation, and that those skills are really showing now when, I hate to say it about them, but so far the playoffs have been easier than the regular season was for Fenwick.
Yeah. You can say that about a lot of the Catholic League. It's just the way it is. I mean, they go through such a grind in the regular season, and then to get to the playoffs. But yeah, turning attention to Class 7A, game that I'm going to be on Saturday with Lincoln Way West going to Downers Grove North. I'll tell you, Soucie, Downers Grove North, they've had an interesting year. Let's just say it that their coach Joe Horeni told me after Saturday's game after Glenbard West, he admitted it's been a long year. They start the year as one of the favorites in 7A. They lose on Lanzu for a while. They get him back. Then they lose Aiden Selecki, their Purdue recruit lineman. But, man, that was impressive, the way they went into Glenbard West and just really just made it very difficult for a very good offense. Now they go home to play Lincoln Way West. I don't know. What do you make about this one? It's got to make it a pretty good game.
Yeah, it does. Lincoln Way West just seems to have, a whole bunch of players that, are good football players, but people don't get super excited about them because, they don't have the huge college offers or situations like that. But as a group, as a, 22 plus, special teams and all that other stuff, they just work really well together, especially on the defensive side of the ball. They make a lot of plays. They're not going to wow you. You're not going to get a lot of fireworks from the Lincoln Way West football team, but you're going to get a lot of productivity and very strong, accurate football. That's just what they do, and it's what they've done for a while now. They don't really care about flash. They care about the end of the game, and usually that tends to be a W in their favor. So I think this could potentially be a really, really interesting game. And once again, you'll look at the end of it and think about, well, nobody had a huge game for Lincoln Way West, but when you add up the sum of the parts, it tends to be pretty impressive.
Seem like two really good defenses. This seems like a game destined to be a low-scoring game, so I'm sure it'll be 31-30. But it just seems like defense is really where they hang their hat. So yeah, we'll see. It should be a good one. At the bottom of the bracket, St. Charles North going to Brother Rice. And Soucie, I'll be the first one to admit I got it wrong. I thought St. Charles North was going to lose that game last week. That was a really impressive win in the rain, of course, and coming from behind to beat Carmel. And now, congratulations. Now you go to Brother Rice. And Brother Rice looks awesome so far. Yeah,
Brother Rice has really looked kind of machine-like pretty much ever since their only loss of the season to Mount Carmel. And they looked pretty good in that game, too, to be completely honest with you. They competed well in that game. So this is a team that kind of, moved pretty quickly into my mind's eye as the favorite in 7A, and nothing has happened to change that. I'm interested in what happens here, though. I really think that this game, if Brother Rice rolls their way to victory here, that cements it in my mind, because I think, St. Charles North has proven in some games this year that they can hang in there with good quality opponents. Crazy win over Batavia aside, but can they consistently do it? Can they keep Brother Rice off the scoreboard enough so if this does turn into a shootout, does Brother Rice score on every possession? Does St. Charles North match that? I mean, the potential for that is potentially there. I just don't know if St. Charles North has enough here to make this game where it's just a trading of scores.
I was going to say, I mean, St. Charles North is not going to be scared about playing a tough opponent in a close game. They seem to relish playing close games, and I'm sure they want to play a close game. It's a tough assignment though, going to Brother Rice. So I think we're going to learn. Well, obviously we'll learn a lot about these teams, but if Brother Rice was to come out on top, depending the outcome, I think maybe we'll learn a little bit more about them, see what happens on that one. Looking up to 8A, game that I love. Of course, we're going to talk about the big one in a minute. Game that I love, though, Friend at Bolingbrook. Soucie got to see Friend last week against Lions. Johnny O'Brien, I mean, everything that's talked about him is right. Fantastic player. Can really throw the ball, can really run the ball. Very mature quarterback. Northwestern's getting a good one. But, man, I love their defense, too. I mean, Lions is a team that had been able to run the ball against some really good run defenses and just could not run the football. But now Friend goes to Bolingbrook, and you and I both know Bolingbrook has been a team that has been just getting better and better and better as the season's gone on. This is a fascinating matchup.
When you really kind of look at it, this game kind of features a couple of things that I really wish that I would have had the opportunity to see live this year, and I have not. I think it's kind of an interesting scrap between one of the state's best quarterbacks in Johnny O'Brien, one of the state's best running backs in TJ Lewis for Bolingbrook. I'm so intrigued by this game that I got to be honest with you. When I'm coming home from the game that I'm going to, I'm really, really, really tempted to make a stop on the way home and try to catch at least the second half of this one. That's how intrigued I am by this game.
I'm with you there. I'm covering a 1:00 game, and I was talking to our colleague JT Penalty earlier this week. I'm like, do you need me to cover that 7:00 game? Do you need me? I was like a kid, like nipping at his heels. Like I could do that game for you. It's just fascinating too. In that Fremd, they love to pass the ball. I mean, they were up 3 touchdowns on Lions. They were still passing them on the fourth quarter. Bolingbrook, man, they get that little read action going with Tyson Ward and TJ going. That running game can be really effective. Just an interesting matchup of two different kinds of teams, but 2 very good teams.
Yeah, I'm really intrigued by that one. I just think that's one of those where you just kind of look at it and you can twist your mind into a whole bunch of different outcomes in that one. And it's a real credit to especially, I think, Bolingbrook in this situation. If you would have told me 6 weeks ago that they would be in this situation where I would be strongly considering whether or not they could win a state playoff quarterfinal game against someone like Fremd, I would have said, what are you talking about? I mean, this is a team that over the second half of the season has been as impressive as anyone around.
I mean, like they were a program that they were finished last in the SBC West last year, and they were 1-2 at one point this year, coming off of a 42-7 loss to Oswego. You could tell me that the game was a little bit not that final margin, but they still lost 42-7 in Oswego in week 3. They were very young. Bolingbrook, great basketball program, and you're like, maybe not so much football. They've really come on big time. I mean, this season, very impressive. Should be a good one Saturday night, as will be the game that you're going to be at on Saturday, Lincoln Wee East, Mount Carmel, a game that we would love to see in Normal in a couple weeks, but we will not. We'll see it on the south side of Chicago. Soucie, I guess the question I have is, at one point in this year, I kind of felt like Mount Carmel was 1, Lincoln Wee East was 1A, in terms of maybe Mount Carmel's a favorite, but Lincoln Wee East was right with them. Jonas goes down for a couple weeks. They lose a couple games. Now he's back. I mean, are they getting back to that point? Can they get to that point? What do you make of that?
Well, the thing that's been the biggest problem, not only the injury to Jonas Williams, that obviously caused them to pick up, a big part in why they took those 2 regular season losses. And that's why we're getting this game now instead of deeper into the tournament, because Lincoln Wee East fell to the 9 seed in the bracketing process. They've also had some other injuries that have kind of hampered them in some ways. They lost a linebacker for the season, Division I talent, defensive end Alexander. He's back now, but he was out for a while too. And I think one of the bigger ones that not a lot has been made of because they've been clicking since Jonas came back. In the Week 9 game, Blaine LaVista, the Washington recruit, nasty injury against Sandberg in Week 9. He's gone for the year. So that weakens the Lincoln Way East wide receiving core. It was interesting. I was at the Week 1 playoff win over Stevenson, and Jonas threw a couple of passes to a receiver that I had never heard of before. I didn't know who he was. I mean, that kind of shows where the depth was. They brought up a kid from the sophomore team that caught some passes in that game. So the receiving core is a little bit thinner than it was before. Jonas is so good that you almost didn't notice. Like, that's really what it comes down to, because he made a throw early in that game that I watched it happen because I was standing around the 15-yard line. The ball was at like the 40. He threw it. I saw it in the air, and I'm like, that's going to hit that kid in the fingertips as long as he runs in it correctly. I mean, the window was about this big for him to throw that through. He threw it through. And I'm like, he's the best high school football quarterback I've ever seen. I say that with no reservation. That is honestly what I believe. Will he be enough to pull Lincoln Way East through this against a bevy of Division I talent on the Mount Carmel side of the football? I don't know the answer to that. I think he's going to give it everything he's got to try to do that. And I don't want to make it sound like it's a one-man show, because Lincoln Way East does have some other very talented players. It's just that the treasure trove of high-quality talent that Mount Carmel has, that's going to be hard for anyone to offset. If anybody's going to do it, I think he might be the one to do it. And I think this team might be the one to do it. Do I think that this is a toss-up? I don't. I think Mount Carmel is the favorite in this game. I'm reluctant to say a substantial favorite, but I do think they're the favorite.
The other question I have too is that there was a time in the year, and maybe it's still here, that it's like, all right, as great as Jonas is, their defense is just so dominant now, and I just wonder how it's going to stand up against the Mount Carmel team that you mentioned is, loaded wide receiver position on all the way down.
So it's such a skillful team. Emmett Dowling is having a huge year for them at quarterback. That Lincoln Way East secondary is going to get tested because there's just so much talent in that wide receiving core. And the problem that a lot of teams have is it's not just one guy you got to worry about reining in. It's 2 or 3 guys that you have to keep in check, because if you don't, one of them is going to get loose, and that's all they need. So, it's just such a deep and talented team, and I don't think there's any chance of what maybe happened to Mount Carmel earlier in this playoff run. There's no chance they're looking past this Lincoln Way East team, because this is the game that everyone's been talking about since back in August. I mean, everyone was anticipating when this game was going to happen. Everyone thought it would be in the state championship game. Both of these two teams have been hearing about it all year long. What happens in the Mount Carmel game? What happens in the Lincoln Way East game? So there's absolutely no chance that Mount Carmel comes in with maybe a little less focus than maybe they did in Week 1 of the playoffs when they were playing a Loyola team that almost beat them, but they had just beat them the week before. So no chance of that happening. So, hopefully both teams give their best effort and the chips fall where they may.
No doubt about it. Should be a lot of fun. You'll be there on Saturday. I'll be following very closely on TV, your updates, all of that good stuff. So it should be a lot of fun. I think that does it for us, Soucie. I think we're going to get out of here. Again, everybody enjoy quarterfinal Friday and Saturday, and everybody have a great week.